Today I'll talk about compartment syndrome and Volkmann ischemic contracture. So to learn Volkmann ischemic contracture, first we have to read about compartment syndrome. Volkmann ischemic contracture doesn't happen it itself without compartment syndrome. First, compartment syndrome has to be there, and if the pressure continues, there will be prolonged ischemia, which will eventually lead to your Volkmann ischemic contracture. So let's discuss about compartment syndrome a bit. I think most of you already know about compartment syndrome. It has been discussed many times. Just a review, and it is important from your exam point of view as well as your knowledge point of view. In future, in your practice, you might come across compartment syndrome. Though you might not be able to treat a patient with compartment syndrome, but a prompt diagnosis will make a huge difference. A prompt and early diagnosis of compartment syndrome can save the patient's limb. Because once the compartment syndrome has already developed, if you intervene at that time, the outcome is not going to be good. We have to diagnose a patient with compartment syndrome before the compartment syndrome develops. So you have to know all the points. So what is compartment? A closed area of muscle groups, nerves and blood vessels surrounded by fascia. Muscles are arranged in different compartments and surrounded by one fascia. This arrangement is called osteofascial compartment. So compartment syndrome is nothing but increased pressure in the osteofascial compartment. Normal pressure is 5 to 15 mm Hg, and intercompartmental pressure, if rises more than 35 to 40, they will call it compartment syndrome. What is acute compartment syndrome is defined as an elevation in osteofascial compartment pressure to a level and for a duration that without decompression will cause tissue ischemia and necrosis. Please you remember this definition. You can take a screenshot of this thing. Then Volkmann ischemic contracture is a sequel of untreated or inadequately treated compartment syndrome that I have already told. If the ischemia prolongs in acute compartment syndrome, or if the acute compartment syndrome is left untreated, then necrotic muscle and nerve tissue is replaced by fibrous tissue and leads to Volkmann's ischemic contracture. Now let's talk about compartment syndrome. Our leg is the most common site. Tibia fracture is commonest cause and anterior compartment is most frequently involved. Forearm is the second commonest site. Supracondylar fracture is the commonest cause with flexor compartment most frequently involved. So in adult, the most commonly our tibia fracture leads to compartment syndrome of the leg, whereas in pediatric age group, the supracondylar fracture is the commonest cause and forearm is the involved. Now always remember that acute compartment syndrome is a medical emergency and caused by a severe injury, most of the times with an underlying bony injury, fracture, and can lead to permanent muscle damage. Let's now talk about this chronic compartment syndrome. It is not that important. Now, what are the conditions that increases the volume of compartment? Fracture is the most common cause, which increases the pressure inside a osteofascial compartment. Then is your soft tissue injury, crash syndrome, then exercise, bleeding diathesis. These are snake bite. Yes, day before yesterday also in our emergency, a baby girl came with snake bite and compartment syndrome. So though rare, but we see these things. Then burns, then diabetes, hypothyroidism, less unlikely. So the most common is your fracture, soft tissue injury, crash syndrome, then your arterial puncture, osteotomy, snake bite. These are the most common cause. Yeah, burns also. So here you can see the pathogenesis. So what are the effect of raised tissue pressure on muscle? So obviously if the pressure is increased, the blood flow will be less to the muscle and there will be ischemia followed by necrosis with increasing periods of complete ischemia producing irreversible changes. And the duration of muscle ischemia dictates the amount of necrosis. There is little dispute about the effects of raised tissue pressure on neurologic function. Now, what are the, we always talk about what are the signs and symptoms. Always remember that compartment syndrome is a clinical diagnosis. You have to diagnose it clinically. Though in my subsequent slides, I will be talking about measurement of the compartment pressure with catheter and all, but these are not so available in all the facilities. So some books, they have described 5P, named pain out of proportion. It is the most common. Whenever you are talking about clinical presentation, this will be the first point. Disproportionate pain. Then pallor, paresthesia, paralysis, and your pulselessness. And some books, they have added one more P, that is poikilothermia. 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 Poikilothermia is nothing but is a condition where the temperature of your limb will be less than that of your room temperature. So whenever you are talking about the clinical presentation of the compartment syndrome, please tell in this sequence. Don't say paralysis and pulselessness in the very first. Once the paralysis and pulselessness is there, that means the compartment syndrome has already been established. So start from the point pain out of proportion or disproportionate pain, then there will be pallor, then there will be paresthesia, then paralysis and pulselessness at the last. Yes, pain is the earliest symptom, classically out of proportion to injury. That means the injury in itself would not give such pain. Then severe pain with passive stretch. What is passive stretch? Suppose my hand is like this and I do this thing, this is passive stretch. For example, in a tibia fracture, if you dorsiflex the foot, that is passive stretch. In supracondylar fracture, there will be compartment syndrome in the forearm. So if you flex the wrist joint, that will give a passive stretch in the forearm. So you have to give some passive stretch and there will be severe pain. Pain is not responsive to the normal doses of pain medication. Very important. Specificity is 97%. Now, why there is severe pain with passive stretch? During passive stretch of muscle, there is increased intramuscular pressure. And passive pressure in a volume loaded compartment increases more during passive stretching than in a normally hydrated compartment. Then why we see paresthesia? Paresthesia we see because the nerve also has blood supply and because of the increased compartmental pressure, it also suffers from ischemia and ultimately leading to paresthesia. Then paralysis is a very late finding. Pallor, pulselessness rarely present. I told you, compartment syndrome at the last stage only we see your pulselessness. The pulse oximetry, always remember, is helpful in identifying limb hypoperfusion, is not sensitive enough to exclude compartment syndrome. Differential diagnosis: cellulitis, DVT, gas gangrene, peripheral nerve injury, muscle rupture, necrotizing fasciitis. Now, some institute they have specially able catheter to do pressure measurement. I'll just show you the pictures. Yeah, there is two types. One is needle manometer method or white side saline infusion technique. These are nothing but some sort of inventory which can measure the compartment pressure. So you can all remember the name of this catheter, the Wick catheter. See, and the slit catheter. Just remember these two names, no need to go in detail. Wick catheter and slit catheter to measurement of your compartment syndrome. Now I tell you again and again that compartment syndrome is a clinical diagnosis. If you have all these equipments, you can go and measure, but these are of clinical, not much of clinical importance. Compartment syndrome, you have to diagnose clinically only. Then STIC, solid state transducer intercompartmental catheter. So these are basically well designed, or you can say a very hi-fi type of catheter which are capable of measuring the compartment pressure. One is slit catheter, then a wick catheter, and this stick catheter system. So that's how you put this thing inside the compartment and it will measure the pressure inside. Now, when you will do fasciotomy, if you see the pressure is more than 30 or to 40 mm mercury in the catheter, then you do fasciotomy. But clinically, if you suspect compartment syndrome, then immediately go for fasciotomy. No need to measure all these things. Now, what are the management? Immediately, you remove any kind of plaster or constrictive bandage. You elevate the limb. You stop any activity. Give ice. Then fasciotomy is the only successful treatment. I'm telling you again and again. So whenever you suspect compartment syndrome, you go for fasciotomy. See, this is a very commonly, it is a very common scenario that we do. It is a case of tibia fracture. So you don't only do fasciotomy in case of a fracture. You have to stabilize the fracture ends also. Suppose you do the fasciotomy, you will release the pressure. But what with the fracture? If you don't immobilize the fracture ends will continuously poke your surrounding soft tissue and it will continuously lead to your bleeding or soft tissue injury. So you stabilize the fracture also whenever you do fasciotomy. Now always remember these principles. I have already told that early diagnosis, any muscle necrosis must be thoroughly debrided to avoid infection, preserve the neurovascular structure, and coverage within 7 to 10 days. No scope for limited or subcutaneous fasciotomy. Whenever you talk about fasciotomy, it has to be liberal. There is nothing like limited or subcutaneous fasciotomy. See, why I was telling prompt diagnosis is very important. See, within 6 hours, if you do fasciotomy, complete recovery. Within 12 hours, 6 to 70% normal limb function. And if you delay the patient with a compartment syndrome for more than 12 hours, only 8%. That means around 90% patient will have the limb damaged. All these approaches are not so important. We just see how it looks. In the leg, most of the time we do double incision fasciotomy. In the forearm, single incision. This incision is in the single forearm, it is single incision. We are carving the incision like this because on the radial side, we have radial artery as well as all our flexor tendons will be lying here. So we don't want the tendons exposed. I have already told in the principle of the fasciotomy that neurovascular and the vital structures needs to be preserved. So we give the incision from this so that this flap will cover the underlying neurovascular structures. This is on fasciotomy in forearm. We have two compartments. One is dorsal compartment and one is volar compartment. Now you have done the fasciotomy. Now you have to manage the wound. How will you manage the wound? So we never close the wound. We always left it like this. And we do wound inspection after 48 hours. And if we are satisfactory that there are no underlying necrosis, then we continue dressing. If we find that there are underlying necrosis of the muscles, then we take for re-debridement. Now skin closure should be avoided. Till there is healthy granulation tissue and all the muscle groups, you are very sure that all the muscle groups are viable. Now, how will you do the skin closure? We put VAC or vacuum assisted closure that reduces swelling, promotes tissue granulation, and increases perfusion. After VAC, once the wound gets contracted, we go for delayed primary closure. And sometimes we are unable to close, so we have to take help of split thickness skin grafting. Say this was the fasciotomy wound. Here is the direct closure was possible in this case, but in this case over the tibia, direct closure was not possible. So here a skin grafting was done. So what are the complications? These are the some complications. What are the late sequelae? In the late sequelae, compartment syndrome, if it is not treated, your Volkmann's contracture. Then weak dorsiflexor, clot, sensory loss, chronic pain, and ultimately amputation if the limb is not viable at all. Now, how can we prevent the compartment syndrome? Minimize the external application of pressure, not closing facial defects, minimizing tissue ischemia, and performing prophylactic fasciotomy, protecting soft tissue. These are not clinical importance. Only thing we have to keep in our mind whenever we are treating any acute fracture, we don't put too much of external pressure. That's why in acute fracture, never put a cast. In acute fracture, always put a slab. And in Lorling fracture, always elevate the limb so that you don't get too much of swelling. Now this is the Volkmann's systemic contracture. If you compartment syndrome is left untreated, then you get this Volkmann's systemic contracture. Necrosis of nerve and muscle within the compartment. The necrosed muscles will be eventually replaced by fibrosis and which will give a contracted appearance of the limb. So that is the basic things of the Volkmann systemic contracture. Because of the compartment pressure, the muscles will be ischemic, and if it is left untreated, it will get infected and never recover and is replaced by inelastic fibrous tissue. Common etiology, neglected compartment syndrome. So primary target is the muscles, secondary target is the nerve. The pathogenesis etiology I have already discussed in the compartment syndrome part. So this is the classical presentation of your Volkmann ischemic contracture in upper extremity. And it is given in your Maheshwari in complication of supracondylar fracture of humerus. Please read it. And whenever we speak about Volkmann ischemic contracture, this is the picture that comes in our mind. So, what are the deformity? There will be elbow flexion, then there will be wrist flexion, and there will be flexion of the interphalangeal joints. So, this is the deformity in upper extremity. Most of the time, there will be flexion only. See here, elbow flexion, wrist flexion, and your IP flexion. Now the severity may vary from mild, moderate, and severe. And mild, that means limited to extrinsic finger flexors, usually 2 or 3 fingers. Intrinsic muscles are not involved. Fixed joint contractures. Intrinsic muscles means the muscles, small muscles of the hand. Fixed joint contractures are not present, usually occurring in young adults. Then moderate, that is the classic type. Primarily affects your FDP and FPL, occasionally FDs, FCR, and FCU. Wrist and thumb are flexed, and there will be claw hand deformity. In the mild type, there will be not obvious claw hand deformity. And severe, that means it affects the forearm extensors as well as flexors. Now, what are the investigation? We will do a plain radiography, then angio, MRI, and direct nerve stimulation. This splint is, it was from the World War II time. These are not used nowadays. The strapping and all are of little value in case of your ischemic contractures. Most of the times you have to go for soft tissue release. So in the mild case, you can go for conservative management, dynamic splintage at night extension splint. In the mild cases, you can go for excision of the infected muscle and lengthening of the tendon. In moderate case, this you can remember it has been asked in MCQ also, that Max Page's muscle sliding operation is done in which condition? It is ballpoint ischemic contracture. So just remember the name for your MCQ point of view, Max Page operation. So what does it do? Basically, it releases your common flexor origin from the medial epicondyle. All our medial flexor group of muscles in the forearm has a common origin from the medial epicondyle. So, since these muscles are contracted, it releases the common flexor origin. The neurolysis and tendon transfers are also there. Then you can also go for nerve decompression. All these surgical procedures are not so important for you in the Volkmann ischemic contracture. Just remember the definition of Volkmann ischemic contracture that I have told you. What are the common etiology? What is the pathogenesis? Then what is the deformity? In the upper extremity only, you describe the deformity. And the most common cause of Volkmann ischemic contracture is your supracondylar fracture humerus. It is the most common cause, and it will lead to your this classical deformity. And in the operation, you can just simply write that tendon transfer, soft tissue release, excision of the necrosed muscle. Then I told you to remember the name of only one operation, that is Max Page muscle sliding operation, that we do in moderate to severe cases. In mild cases, we don't do. Now, summary: compartment syndrome has disastrous consequences if permitted to run its course. So always remember, make an early